The Christian religion, supervised by bishops, brought civil order to Alsace in the Middle Ages. Medieval Europe traced its salvation, the forgiveness of its sins, its hope for eternity, to the anguish of the crucified Christ. Nowhere was that Christian drama more poignantly visualized than in the Alsace by Matthias Grünewald. But out of the death of the cross, Europe claimed a cosmic victory. The medieval Christian ideal was a knightly hero, pure in motive and empowered by God to put down evil to protect the right. He fought evil in the name of Christ, identifying not with Christ's sacrifice and vulnerability, but with his triumph. The Romans, colonizers all along the Rhine River in the time of Christ, called the original settlement Argentina, or Argentoratum, the place of silver, because of the way the sun's rays reflected shiningly from the sprawling Rhine. The ancient fortification had grown where the smaller Ill River joins the Rhine, providing a meeting of trade routes. After the Roman Empire collapsed, the words for road and fortress were joined into the name Strasbourg. From the red sandstone of quarries in the nearby Vosges Mountains, Strasbourg was built into the status of a free imperial city of the German Empire, prospering in its position as a commercial crossroads, making its own laws, maintaining its own order, evolving its own style. Its Gothic cathedral became one of the splendors of Europe, capturing in the frozen music of its iconography the human dream of life with a sacred and unified meaning. Seldom, if ever, had medieval Europe reached so exquisitely toward God as in this rose-colored hymn of stone, for centuries the tallest building in Christendom. Many generations later, the power of its storytelling statuary would transfix the budding young German genius, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The Jewish tradition was depicted as blinded to the light of Christ's gospel, whereas the church was shown as victorious. But Strasbourg had a guilty memory. Once the city's Jews, falsely rumored to have poisoned the city's water, had been hideously massacred. In the name of order, the dragon of disorder had been loosed. But with Mary and her holy child on the very seal of its political independence, Strasbourg proudly proclaimed its Christian identity. A city is an attempt at human order, to keep chaos away, to make life safe for community. A city does not identify with Christ in his giving up his life. A city protects its life.
The council shall swear itself and its officers, and all men 18
And to make certain of its solidarity, Strasbourg and other neighboring cities demanded that their men subscribe annually to an oath. The conditions were written directly into the city's charter, the oath letter, or Schwörbrief.
As it stands in the letter.
As it stands in the letter.
Which has been read before me.
Which has been read before me.
So will I do.
So will I do.
Remaining faithful without exception.
Remaining faithful without exception.
So help me God.
So help me God.
But into the Europe of 1524 burst the harsh cry of dissent. Tax-weary peasants, having read the recently printed Bible, violently demanded new freedoms. In the Swiss city of Zurich, a powerful Protestant preacher, Ulrich Zwingli, won the political support of his city council in closing down the monasteries. Leaders from Alsace, too, such as Professor Sebastian Brandt and Preacher Geiler of Kaisersberg, had already come out wholeheartedly in favor of the church reform. Strasbourg's tolerant mayor, Jacob Sturm, accepted the Zurich type of reform, but not Zurich's persecution of religious dissidents. A set of Strasbourg's leading pastors persuaded their city council to legislate a Protestant reorganization. Now, instead of the Catholic priesthood, the Protestant clergy had their spiritual authority backed by civil law. In these changeful 1520s, moderate Strasbourg became a city of hope to people seeking a radical Christian reform of society. Whereas other cities might execute their dissidents, Strasbourg was said to expel them at worst. Among the crowds of pilgrims pouring into Strasbourg were many people called Anabaptists. This epithet, meaning rebaptizer, was applied in scorn to people who said Christians should enter the church not as unconscious infants, but on adult confession of their faith. This challenged traditional church-state order and was called heresy or treason by Catholic and Protestant authorities. Among the many Anabaptists who came to Strasbourg in 1526 was Michael Satler. Satler could have had several reasons for his journey: to talk with the reforming preachers in Strasbourg, or to visit Anabaptist friends in difficulty with the law there.
Jail.
For years, Satler had been prior of a monastery in the Black Forest. Soon after a challenge by peasants in their tumultuous revolt of 1524, he had left the Benedictine order and married. To support himself, he learned the weaving trade.
Oh, here is where Mrs. Zell is. Mrs. Zell?
Yes?
Katharina Zell
heard
was the
that the
wife of the
faithful
preacher of
Strasbourg
Strasbourg's
Strasbourg.
cathedral, Matthias
You are the
Zell.
wife of the priest
Noted
of
for
the
her
cathedral,
compassion,
are you
she
not?
and her well-known husband shared their home with a variety of the religious refugees
My
pouring
husband,
hopefully into their
Matthias
city.
And I can turn no hungry and homeless people away. Come here to the door.
Thank you.
The most influential Strasbourg preacher in the Reform was another ex-monk, Martin Butzer. After serious discussions, Satler left the city voluntarily, convinced that the main reformers were not ready for a radical reshaping of society according to the Sermon on the Mount.
I suppose, Katharina, that Michael Satler's fate is on your mind. Wrong as that poor man was, I have no doubt that he was a dear friend of God. He had an excellent zeal for righteousness, but he simply could not be satisfied with the most tolerant city of Europe.
Katharina Zell, the cathedral preacher's wife, understood the Anabaptist critique better, and she used strong language to denounce the persecution of these non-resistant Christians. News came from the nearby Black Forest that Michael Satler, shortly after leaving Strasbourg, had been brutally executed by Catholic authorities. His tongue had been torn out, and his body repeatedly ripped with red-hot irons before he was burned alive. His wife had been given the more merciful sentence of drowning in the Neckar River. Katharina admonished Strasbourg's authorities to punish lawbreakers, not people who had a different idea of the church. She reminded Strasbourg forcibly of what her own husband, Preacher Zell, had said one day from his pulpit in the cathedral. Raising his arm to the crowd, he had declared, "I take God, heaven, and earth as my witness on the day of judgment that I am innocent of the tormenting and expelling of these poor people from the city of Strasbourg, the city of their hope."
And still more of them are coming.
Pilgrim Marpeck, an engineer in the Tyrol, was hired by the city of Strasbourg even though he was an Anabaptist. He was to oversee the work of supplying Strasbourg with wood from the Black Forest across the Rhine. While less radical than Michael Satler, Marpeck too refused as a Christian to accept the oath or the sword. And by the time he became a citizen of the city, he had called together a Christian congregation meeting in private homes.
The trouble with you, Pilgrim, is that you and your wife have such an unblameable character. You want to be better than other people.
I want to be obedient to Christ.
And Christ says, love your neighbor as yourself. This is the second highest commandment. And by preserving the stability and the unity of the church in Strasbourg, you are showing for the citizens of that city that highest love.
You must ask them to change their ways and be baptized. That is the highest expression of love.
They already have all been baptized, every one of them.
I don't call it being baptized when a baby who understands nothing is watered by a priest or a minister. What can a baby repent of?
Repentance comes later. God said to Abraham, I will love all your descendants. And so the babies then were circumcised to show that they were part of God's family, his covenant. Now, baptism replaces circumcision.
If you interpret the Bible in that way, you can justify people doing whatever was permitted in the Old Testament. And you make everybody a member of the Church of Christ because they know their right hand from their left. This isn't reform. This isn't love. It's simply preserving the old society and keeping the approval of the town council that controls it.
Engineer Marpeck was the leader of the moderate Anabaptists in Strasbourg. In legally forbidden meetings, these people were trying to reshape the church to what they called the rule of Christ, as found in the Gospel of Matthew. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am with you. And what you order on earth will be ordered in heaven. For such a church, the Anabaptists felt no need of complicated liturgy, hierarchy, or government sanction. But since Strasbourg forbade such unofficial religious gatherings, the Anabaptists went outside the city walls for meetings of any size. They were known to meet in the woods by the Bruche River, near the village of Eckbolsheim. In barns, stone quarries, forests, and caves, from Switzerland to Alsace to Germany and Holland, Anabaptists gathered outside the walls of the cities that rejected them, to worship and to discern what the Church of Christ should be and how they should live. Catholic, Lutheran, and Reformed pastors, tightly allied with local governments, viewed this unofficial church as a passing phenomenon, too unstable to survive for long, but quite dangerous to Christendom while it lasted. The Anabaptist Fellowship, nevertheless, produced a durable Christian family.
Are gathered in the name of Christ. He is there with them.
The Council of Strasbourg agreed to hear a debate between the city pastors and the city's engineer, Pilgrim Marpeck. Already the councillors had ruled that the pastors could stop celebrating the Mass, and they wished to be as fair as possible with Marpeck too. Martin Butzer felt they had been too lenient with Marpeck. Butzer was counting on legal backing for a complete Protestant takeover of the city's life.
But there is freedom in Strasbourg to preach the gospel and to carry out the reform.
He charged that the multiple varieties of Anabaptists in the city were hurting the public consensus. Marpeck, though also regretting the fragmentation of the many sects, stood firm. His shocking challenge to Strasbourg's Protestant clergy was that whoever tried to form the Church of Christ from behind the sword of government protection was under a curse.
The decision of the Council regarding Pilgrim Marbeck is as follows.
The council responded somewhat reluctantly to Marpeck's refusal to give up his separate church, or his refusal of the oath and the use of the sword in defense of the city. Because of his usefulness in his role as engineer, the city would have gladly kept him. But since he persisted in his views, he was ordered to shut his mouth on spiritual topics and leave the city of Strasbourg within 2 weeks.
It has been revealed to
One Anabaptist whom Strasbourg chose to keep in jail rather than expel was Melchior Hoffmann. A former Lutheran preacher who had become an Anabaptist in Strasbourg, Hoffmann had traveled up and down Europe, winning a wide following among people looking for a more Christian society. Though personally a friendly and good-hearted man, Hoffmann was also a fanatic. He was convinced that he was a forerunner of Christ's return to earth. Hoffmann himself believed Christians should be totally nonviolent. In order to avoid trouble, he even called on his followers to stop baptizing. But among Hoffmann's disciples in the northern lowlands were Anabaptists, excited by his predictions, who were no longer willing to wait for God to begin the new age.
Set up the throne of his power, and then from all the earth shall come to thee, the chosen.
They seized control of the Westphalian city of Münster and proclaimed that it, rather than Strasbourg, was the New Jerusalem. When besieged by Catholic troops, the town developed strange behavior, including polygamy. After its collapse, 3 of the city's leaders were displayed publicly in neighboring regions, tortured, and their bodies placed in cages on a church tower as a reminder of the dangers of Anabaptism. A former priest from Friesland named Menno Simons, heartbroken by the Münster debacle, then led a peaceful group of the Anabaptists in a new fellowship, who soon received the nickname Mennonites. Mennonites from the Netherlands conferred secretly with southern Anabaptists at Strasbourg's famous bridge across the Rhine. The Dutch Mennonites soon achieved not only toleration, but wealth and social status, even in Amsterdam. It was different for the Anabaptists in Switzerland and Alsace. Convinced of their rejection by the city and robbed of intellectual leadership, the rural remnant let their bold vision of a new society settle into a network of devout, socially withdrawn families. After the 30 Years' War, Swiss Anabaptists took up wasted farms in the lonely forests of the Vosges Mountains of Alsace. Here they read the Bible in the privacy of their families for 2 centuries. They had their own Christian but separate society, entered by adult baptism and carefully noted in congregational records. They were known as remarkably good farmers who restored ruined lands. Only because of this were they excused from civil oaths or wielding a soldier's sword. In 1789, at the capital city of Paris, French society convulsed in a revolution felt around the world. A new order based on the natural rights of man was introduced. But the price for this sudden change was a reign of terror. The guillotine, as recalled every hour of the day by a clock in Mutzig, just west of Strasbourg. It was Strasbourg itself that gave to a redefined France its triumphal hymn of identity, the Marseillaise. Composed and sung first in April of 1792, it was a song of war for human rights. But out in his farmhouse in the Vosges, the Anabaptist was concerned. They sent an appeal to the National Convention in Paris. In response, the convention issued a circular sympathetically calling the Anabaptists simple hearts and granting them military exemption over the signature of the leader of the Reign of Terror, Robespierre. But the exemption was not long honored. Under the new rule of Napoleon, all male citizens were expected to be soldiers. The Mennonites would have to change either their country or their religion. This document was taken along by a family moving from Alsace to North America, where Mennonites had exemption from military service. And so, where Anabaptist farms such as the Kupferschmidt home in the Vosges now began to stand shuttered and empty, in North America, thousands of Alsatian Anabaptists still farm prosperously. They include the strict Amish, whose men still wear the Alsatian hat and decline military service in the name of Christ. The North American Amish still use their old Anabaptist hymn book, which contains a song written by Michael Satler around the time he visited Strasbourg. In 1871, the crossroad city became a prize of war as Germany seized Alsace from France. One of the war's slaughters took place at the French and German border on Mennonite farmland near Wissembourg. It was the estate of the Geisberg Chateau, rented from its aristocratic owners for generations by a cluster of Mennonite families.
Well, this cannonball I picked up about 6 years ago on our field on the Mennonite farm. It dates from the big war in 1870 between
Willie
France
Hager
and
grew
Germany,
up on the
where
Geisberg
this,
farm.
French
He
general
remembers the
was
story of the
killed
death of a
just
general in the Battle of
Battle
1871.
had started.
The corpse was laid out on the floor of the Mennonite home, where for generations the Hagers held their family gatherings.
That's where we used to celebrate Christmas and our feasts.
The biggest chaos of all, World War II, destroyed the beautiful Geisberg Chateau. The Mennonite families had to flee, and almost everything was destroyed but the garden pavilions. Now only Werner Hirschler's model is left to show what the chateau once was. Living on land marked by monuments to the repeated thrashings of the dragon of war, the Mennonite farmer remembers the centuries-old dream of an order beyond the national one. It's the vision of Christ's reconciliation, in which the peace of God, not the triumph of this or that nation, is extended to all things, in heaven and in earth. Around obsolete fortifications, Mennonite families farm the land in testimony to Christ's order, a different kind of keeping the peace. This order seems ultimately more hopeful than the Maginot Line with its futile bunker on the Wenger farm on the border of France and Switzerland. On the northern border of Alsace is a home for children, founded after World War II by North American Mennonites working with the Red Cross. It was a different kind of war memorial. It was for children with problems caused by the war. Later, the French Mennonites themselves took charge of Mont des Oiseaux. Here and at several other such homes, one in Paris, they try to serve the vulnerable in the hope of the world learning the love and peace of God. Among the volunteers at Mont des Oiseaux are Mennonite conscientious objectors to war, doing civil service as an alternative to military duty. 2 years of civil service are permitted in place of 1 year of military duty. As his spiritual ancestor, Pilgrim Marpeck, 4.5 centuries ago, he believes he must do this to be in good fellowship with God and his fellow human beings. Strasbourg is still a crossroads city, a crossroads of Europe. It remains the largest inland port of Europe, and the Rhine is still busy with Europe's traffic. The cathedral still dominates the city's physical and historic profile, drawing pilgrims and tourists from afar of various levels of seriousness. Coming to Europe from developing countries, young persons can identify today with the struggles of the peasants when the Anabaptist Fellowship was formed.
I grew up in Africa and I came to Strasbourg because I had political problems in my country. And I stayed during 5 years in Paris studying, and now I'm living in Strasbourg, you see, just for studying.
Sometimes it's difficult for people to find work in their own countries, or there may be political tensions which lead them to seek a home elsewhere. The concerns of struggling people do not seem to have changed much between 1524 and 1984. The city walls themselves and the cannon may be gone, but the nations still are trying to keep peace with weapons of death. For them, the victory of Christ is less real than the threat of chaos. After 2 incredibly wasteful wars, 6 and now 10 European nations have joined in a parliament and council with headquarters in the ancient crossroads city of Strasbourg.
On reprend et on reprend le vote.
Thus, Strasbourg has become a focus of European concerns. It debates the great question, what should the community of Europe be like?
Est-ce que tout le monde veut s'asseoir?
What you'll be doing is requiring a small country to face a stricter set of limitations than IBM or Ford or Shell, with whom we've dealt in the first part. Therefore, I'm sorry, I have tried not to be a partisan rapporteur. Can I just point out that that is the logic of the situation you find yourself in?
Strasbourg is back to its ancient questions. How should the new human society be built?
Those against?
How can the divisiveness of national boundaries be overcome?
Abstentions?
How can there be peace on earth?
Mr. President,
how can the rich and developing nations cooperate? How can minorities receive their rights? How can the dragon of human chaos be slain?
In the last year. And what you did was right, and I believe it ought to be established as a principle to give freedom to the
As the
individual.
young Parliament of Europe struggles with competing claims and cultural ideas, the old Mennonite family still gathers every week in congregations north, west, and south of Strasbourg. Living near the border, they speak German and Alsatian, in addition to their main language, French. Thus, their worship continues to remind them of their international family. As for their spiritual ancestors, the meeting is more important than ritual. Christianity for them means knowing peace with God by experiencing it with their fellow human beings. This is the basis of their family. The spiritual family of Michael Satler, once expelled from Strasbourg to meet in Alsatian forests, has survived, and now in the computer age, this family is returning to the city to work and to share the unfading hope of Christ's peaceful victory. And from those once forbidden forest meetings outside the city walls has grown an international people. Reconcile the human families of the world so that they bring their various beauty into a peaceful family of praise to God. This is the hope inspired by Christ's victory.